You helped build the most powerful financial force on Earth. You never voted for it. You never signed anything. It happened quietly, every time you got paid. A slice of your paycheck went into a retirement account. That account bought a tiny piece of the whole stock market, and that tiny piece was handed to one of 3 companies. Now do that for 30 years, with hundreds of millions of people, and you get the strangest power structure in modern capitalism. 3 firms you barely think about sitting at the top of almost every giant company in America. This is how that happened, and why the real story is stranger than the meme that says they simply own everything. You've seen the version online. 3 companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, secretly own everything. Their logos stamped on every brand you buy. It's catchy. It's also wrong. And the truth is more interesting than the conspiracy. They don't own those companies. What they hold is something quieter, and in some ways, more powerful. To see it, you have to follow the money, specifically, your money. Start with the size. BlackRock manages about $14 trillion, Vanguard around 11, State Street almost 6. Together, north of $30 trillion. But hold that thought, because that's money they manage for other people, not money they own. And here's the number that launched 1,000 headlines. Across the 500 biggest American companies, these 3 are, combined, the single largest shareholder in roughly 88% of them. Apple, JP Morgan, Coca-Cola, the airline you flew last. Pick a giant, and the odds are the same 3 names sit at the top of its shareholder list. But largest shareholder is not what it sounds like. In any single company, each of the 3 usually holds only about 5 to 7%. That's a minority stake, nowhere near control. And the money isn't even theirs. It belongs to millions of ordinary people whose savings they invest. People like you. When you buy an index fund, you are the owner. They're just the manager who shows up to the meeting on your behalf. So if they don't own these companies, and the money isn't theirs, where is the power? It comes down to one thing: the vote. It wasn't a master plan. In 1976, a man named Jack Bogle launched something boring, a fund that didn't try to beat the market. It just bought all of it, cheaply. Wall Street laughed. They called it un-American. It raised a pathetic $11 million. But boring won. Index funds charge almost nothing. Fees fell from about 1% a year to under 0.1%. And that tiny edge, compounded over decades, quietly vacuumed up the world's savings. By the end of 2023, these passive funds passed the old stock pickers for the very first time. The boring fund ate Wall Street. And 3 companies were holding the biggest spoons. Here's why the vote is everything. Own a share and you get a say on who sits on the board, on executive pay, on the big decisions. Most regular people never bother to vote their shares. The big 3 vote almost all of theirs. So even with about 1/5 of the ownership, they end up casting roughly 1/4 of all the votes at the average big company, the single largest block in the room. That is the real lever, not a vault stuffed with companies. 1/4 of the ballots at nearly every shareholder meeting in America. So 3 firms can swing the boardroom of almost any major company. And here's the twist nobody expects. They almost never rock the boat. In recent years, they have voted with company management around 90% of the time. By some 2025 counts, even higher. Why so agreeable? Because they are, by design, passive. An index fund can't sell a company it dislikes. It has to hold every stock in the index, basically forever. Its only tool is its voice. And mostly that voice just says, "Sure, sounds good." Picture holding the steering wheel of nearly every car on the road and quietly deciding to keep them all going straight. It isn't always a rubber stamp. In 2021, a tiny activist fund nobody had heard of, owning about 0.02% of ExxonMobil, tried to force 3 of its own candidates onto Exxon's board to push the oil giant harder on climate. It should have been impossible. Then, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street voted with the little guy. The activists won 3 seats. A rounding error investor beat one of the most powerful companies on the planet because the big 3 decided to let it happen. That's the power. It just rarely gets used. So is all this concentrated power a problem? Some economists floated an uncomfortable idea. If the same owners hold all the airlines, why would they want those airlines to bruise each other in a price war? A well-known 2018 study claimed this common ownership nudged airfares a few % higher. It made headlines. Then other economists tried to reproduce the result, and couldn't. They argued the effect falls apart under closer testing. No court has ever ruled it illegal, and regulators have called it an interesting theory, not a proven harm. So file this one under plausible, unproven, and hotly argued, not case closed. There's a second worry that's harder to wave away. Strip it all down, and a huge share of corporate America's votes runs through a handful of people inside 3 firms. A Harvard professor named John Coates gave it a name: the problem of 12. The idea that, before long, roughly 12 people could effectively wield outsized influence over much of the economy. Not because they're cartoon villains, because the plumbing quietly routed all of that power into one small room. So the unsettling question isn't whether they're evil. It's simpler and harder. Who elected them? This is finally getting noticed. Under pressure, all 3 started handing the vote back, letting big investors and even some everyday ones choose how their shares get voted. It's real progress, with a catch. Almost nobody uses it. At one firm, out of millions of eligible investors, only tens of thousands opted in. Meanwhile, the fight turned legal. In late 2024, 11 states sued all 3, accusing them of using their shares to choke competition in coal, claims the firms firmly deny. And regulators are now circling the deepest question of all: whether passive investing at this size is still really passive. And if you're picturing a pyramid with a single villain sitting at the top, there isn't one. Who owns BlackRock, the biggest of the 3? Its single largest shareholder is Vanguard, and State Street's funds are right up there too. The 3 are woven into each other. It's not a pyramid. It's a circle, an enormous, self-referential loop of our own money, managed by a few firms voting on almost everything, mostly to keep things exactly as they already are. There's no secret king. That's the strange part. So, do 3 companies own everything? No, but they vote a huge slice of everything, using money you handed them, often without ever realizing it. The danger was never a cartoon conspiracy. It's geometry. When the savings of most of a country flow through 3 front doors, a tiny number of people end up quietly deciding how thousands of companies are run. They didn't seize that power. We handed it over, one paycheck at a time. So next time someone says 3 companies secretly run the world, you can give them the better answer. It's not that they own us. It's that we hired them and forgot to check what they do with our vote. This has been Cat World Order, making the hidden machinery of the world make sense. None of this is financial advice. If this changed how you see your own 401k, subscribe, the free kind, and tell me what to take apart next.